Chapter 1. From Tragedy to Triumph, My Personal Journey from Sickness to Health. Most of us entered this world with great fanfare, few problems, and no serious health problems. Unfortunately, disease catches many of us later on in life. I was an unlikely candidate for debilitating disease. My father is a naturopathic physician and a chiropractor who made every effort to help his family live the healthy lifestyle he advocated in his practice. My mother gave birth to me at home with the assistance of 4 naturopathic students in Portland, Oregon, and I was given no potentially hazardous immunizations. We ate all of the healthy foods known at the time. When one of my friends came to our house, he said that he wished he had visited the store on the corner first to get some food he recognized. He just wasn't too sure about rice milk, soy cheese, or tofu burgers. I also grew up with a good understanding of the Bible because of the devotion of my parents, who attended a Messianic Jewish people who believe Jesus is the Messiah congregation outside of Atlanta, where my family moved after my second birthday. Throughout childhood and in high school, I was rarely ill. I took antibiotics less than 5 times. Since I had never been hospitalized, I had no idea what it was like to be in a hospital. I was happy, a good student, and very involved in my local Messianic and church ministries. At the age of 17, I went to Florida State University in Tallahassee, Florida, on an academic and athletic scholarship. My extracurricular activities included a spot on the FSU cheerleading squad, campus ministry, singing in a traveling vocal group, and serving as chaplain of my fraternity. Shattered dreams. Disease can arrest your fondest dreams and place your life on hold, sometimes permanently. The first signs that my health was failing were periodic feelings of extreme exhaustion, which occurred during my stint as a summer camp counselor. I'd always enjoyed an abundant energy level, but I actually fell asleep while riding the bus with some of my camp kids who kept calling, "Jordan, wake up." It was embarrassing to say the least, and it soon became a regular occurrence. My energy never returned, and without warning, I faced an onslaught of other health problems, including nausea, stomach cramps, painful mouth sores, and recurring diarrhea. Believing these were temporary symptoms, I committed to attending a week-long overnight camp 4 hours from home. Up close and personal with primitive bathrooms. Most healthy people consider it difficult to camp out in Florida's simmering summer heat, and my unending nausea made it virtually impossible. The usual camp chow wasn't helping. I gulped down quarts of sugary iced tea and became well acquainted with the camp's primitive outdoor bathrooms. I literally ran to the bathroom 15 or 20 times daily. As a result, I lost 20 pounds in 7 days. I had an iron stomach until that time. When TV commercials played for digestive products, I used to wonder what it felt like to have heartburn or diarrhea. Suddenly, I knew the feeling. These symptoms of extreme sickness and fatigue finally forced me to abruptly leave the camp. A friend had to drive me home because I was too sick to drive myself. To spare my mom and dad concern, I delivered an Academy Award performance to hide my illness. I didn't want them to block my return to college, scheduled for 10 days later. If I can just hang on until school starts, everything will be fine, I thought to myself. I just need to get back into the swing of things. I visited a local family doctor and told him about my nausea, constant diarrhea, weight loss, cotton mouth, and fatigue. He immediately tested for viruses, including AIDS. The tests were all negative, which made sense, considering I had never had a blood transfusion or been sexually active. Finally, the doctor prescribed antibiotics and sent me home. Lean and mean, but back in school. Back at Florida State University, the severe gastrointestinal problems continued, although I took the antibiotics faithfully. I tried to ignore what was happening to my body, but the symptoms forced me to discontinue my extracurricular activities. I was still active in my local college church ministry, but I quit the cheerleading squad and the fraternity, and I stopped studying for my American College of Sports Medicine exam. I dropped to 145 pounds from my normal 180 pounds, and I felt as if I was falling apart. Each night I suffered a 104-degree fever and got little sleep between endless trips to the bathroom. My father's dietary supplements. When I finally explored the nutritional collection my father had packed for me, I found acidophilus, aloe juice, digestive enzymes, fiber supplements, and many other herbal and nutritional products. I made myself believe those products would help me get well. That was my introduction to what I like to call the hamster wheel of alternative medicine. Through the years of searching for ways to restore my health, I have come to believe that while alternative medicine and dietary treatments can sometimes be better alternatives to certain medications, most diets and supplements tend to overpromise and underdeliver. In spite of the natural supplements I was taking, my symptoms grew worse and I was continually hungry. Food just seemed to go right through me. I usually stuck to my healthy diet until my friend who worked at a sorority kitchen would bring home leftovers. That sent the diet right out the window. I lived with 7 other guys, and we never missed an opportunity to give each other a hard time. We had a central message board used for jokes, harassing messages, and sometimes constructive and hilarious criticism for one another. One of my best friends wrote me a message that accurately reflected my changing physical appearance. "Hey Jordan, Pee Wee Herman called. He wants his body back." That may sound cruel, but I laughed, determined to keep a good sense of humor. Increased concern. I struggled to attend classes, but I avoided telling my parents how ill I was because I didn't want to leave school. One day as I walked to my music class, my hip cracked as if it had dislocated. I started to realize that something was seriously wrong. My gastrointestinal problems had become systemic, which means the pain spread to my joints and other parts of my body. My hip constantly popped out of its socket. I even suffered minor dislocations getting in and out of cars. I tried different diets along with nutritional supplements after I learned the cottonmouth sensation in my mouth indicated oral thrush, which is caused by a fungus called Candida albicans. My father put me on the specific carbohydrate diet to help alleviate the thrush and the diarrhea. Desperation and a difficult diet. Although the diet has reportedly helped some people relieve symptoms, it was difficult for me to follow, especially at college. Unfortunately, I didn't have the self-discipline to stay on such a rigorous diet for very long, and the specific carbohydrate diet didn't relieve my symptoms. Bathrooms became my obsession. Every life decision hinged on the question, where's the nearest bathroom? My friends stopped inviting me on long drives or to activities in isolated locations. Although I prayed constantly and kept a positive attitude as much as I could, the symptoms refused to cooperate and relentless misery began to overwhelm me. Dad took one look and finally, I admitted to my parents how sick I was, and they arranged a flight home for me the very next day. When I walked in, Dr. Dad took one look at me and strode into action. He took my temperature, it read 105 degrees, and put me into a bathtub packed with ice cubes. As I shivered in the ice water, confused and delirious, I didn't know what was happening, but I remember hearing my dad cry out, "My God, I don't want my son to die." The next morning, I made my first ever visit to a hospital, hoping to receive a cure-all prescription so I could get back to school. Instead, the visit lasted 2 full weeks. Depression set in as I lay in bed with intravenous fluids and antibiotics going into each arm. It didn't help that the incessant news coverage on TV was the federal building bombing in Oklahoma City. My body was so overridden by infection that inflammation had set in. Doctors prescribed 2 highly toxic intravenous steroid medications and put me through every test imaginable. I received more x-rays in 2 weeks than most people receive in a lifetime. The radiologists scanned my upper and lower gastrointestinal tracts. I felt as if they conducted deluxe tours of my gut with a full-size TV camera. The results weren't encouraging. The doctor diagnosed Crohn's disease. Actually, it was Crohn's colitis, an abnormal inflammation of the small bowel and colon that causes the intestinal wall to thicken. As this disease progresses, Eventually, the bowel channel narrows and blocks the intestinal tract, robbing it of its ability to absorb nutrients. One of the chosen few victims. As an added complication, I also had marked duodenitis, an inflammation of the duodenum, the first part of the small intestine, that afflicts less than 1% of Crohn's disease patients. As a result, I was literally starving to death, so I was put on total parenteral nutrition, TPN, to put nutrients directly into my bloodstream. Infection and pain raged through my body, while emotional chaos gripped my mind as I tried to cope with this incurable diagnosis of Crohn's disease. Little did I know that my nightmare was just beginning. My doctor said I could expect to live a normal life, except for the lifelong need for medication and a few surgeries. I would be able to father children, but only if I switched medications during the process of conception. Facing the facts. Though I was not familiar with Crohn's disease, I soon learned that, according to the disease's pattern, my future looked bleak. Crohn's victims experience progressive symptoms of abdominal pain, diarrhea, extreme weight loss, and perhaps premature death. I was told that medications would keep me alive, but I quickly discovered that their side effects were nearly as bad as the disease itself. Science knew of no cause or cure for Crohn's at the time, and my prognosis was very poor. Dr. Burrell Crohn discovered Crohn's disease in the early 1900s. One of the most famous persons to be diagnosed with the disease was former President Dwight Eisenhower. No one knows for sure, but doctors estimate between 400,000 to 1 million people suffer from Crohn's disease, with 20,000 or more new cases each year. At this writing, diagnoses of inflammatory bowel disease, Crohn's disease, and ulcerative colitis have increased dramatically, less than a decade after my diagnosis. According to some literature, an incredible 85% of Americans have suffered from some kind of digestive problem. About 2 out of every 10 Americans have been diagnosed with irritable bowel syndrome. The sales of heartburn medications are booming, and some experts predict Crohn's disease may eventually surpass ulcers as the #1 digestive problem in the United States. Embarrassed by my symptoms, I simply told my friends I was sick and avoided details. I desperately hoped to return to school. Naively, I thought the doctor's magic bullet prescriptions would make me well, but health by medication wasn't working. I graduated from intravenous drugs in the hospital to oral medications such as prednisone at home. The first day I took the oral form of prednisone at home, the steroid triggered hallucinations, and I began crying uncontrollably. I also took mesalamine for ulcerative colitis and the antimicrobials Flagyl and Diflucan for the chronic thrush. For good measure, the doctors also put me on ciprofloxacin, Cipro, the drug of choice for non-specific bacterial infections. I topped off this medical cocktail with regular doses of Zantac for the searing heartburn caused by the other medications. Nighttime became my worst nightmare. Despite all the medications, my condition failed to improve. I still rushed to the bathroom up to 30 times a day. Most of my stools were now bloody, and the severity of the cramps made me want to pull my hair out or bang my head against the wall. But if my days were rough, my nights were worse. The persistent nocturnal diarrhea produced chronic sleep deprivation. My bathroom visits continued 24/7, occurring every 45 minutes to an hour. Only rarely did I get more than an hour of unbroken sleep per night. For more than a year, I existed in a state of fatigue and exhaustion, and for good reason. I had an almost unheard of serum iron level of 0 despite my daily iron injections. Iron is an essential component of hemoglobin, the oxygen-carrying protein in the blood. My low serum levels of albumin indicated I was suffering from a severe wasting disease, cachexia, as well as low immunity and rapid deterioration of all body tissues. My body just wasn't absorbing nutrition, which contributed to my starvation, creating more problems. My digestive system wasn't absorbing nutrients, a condition called malabsorption syndrome, and so many toxic drugs were prescribed that their chemical interactions created even more problems than my disease. Taken together, It was quite a shock for a 19-year-old who had never been hospitalized before. Like so many Americans, I did not understand how important the gastrointestinal tract, or gut, is for optimum health. The gastrointestinal system is an engineering marvel and a creative wonder. It is home to a host of bacteria and other microorganisms, some that are good for the body and some that are pathogenic or bad. Scientific and medical research has shown that a proper balance between these intestinal bacteria is key to long-term health. Unfortunately, the modern American diet is literally a candy store for the bad bacteria in the human gut. These bad bacteria love the same sugars, high carbohydrates, and refined foods that we do. The final blow to my health was caused by this bacterial imbalance in my digestive system, dysbiosis, which led to the breakdown of my body's immune barrier. A walking medical encyclopedia. Cutting-edge medical researchers now believe that life and death begin in the digestive tract. If your digestive system breaks down, you will likely encounter a host of seemingly unrelated but debilitating illnesses. In the following chart, I've listed the disease conditions that were working in my body with the hope that if you see yourself or a loved one in this profile, you will take courage that your health can be restored as mine has been. My personal disease profile. Chronic candidiasis, or yeast overgrowth. I had the highest level possible. Intoniba histolytica, a parasite that causes amoebic dysentery. Cryptosporidiosis, a protozoan infection that causes severe intestinal illness. Incipient diabetes, with extremely poor circulation. My lower leg was purple. Jaundice, besides other liver and gallbladder problems. Insomnia, hair loss. Endocarditis, a heart infection. Eye inflammation. Prostate and bladder infections. Extreme anemia. My serum ferritin, iron, level was 0 for over 12 consecutive months. Chronic electrolyte imbalance due to dehydration. Elevated C-reactive protein indicates chronic inflammation and bacterial infection, pointing to increased risk of heart attack and stroke. Anemia indicates a shortage of red blood cells in the bloodstream. Only red blood cells carry oxygen to muscle tissues and organs. Chronic fatigue is a mysterious ailment that includes symptoms of unceasing fatigue, headaches, weakness, aching muscles and joints, and the inability to concentrate. Arthritis is marked by joint inflammation, stiffness, and pain. My immune system was mistakenly attacking itself. Crohn's disease is thought by some to be autoimmune in origin. Perhaps my body had begun attacking my own joints. Leukocytosis is an abnormal increase in white blood cells, especially immature cells. Malabsorption syndrome. My body was unable to absorb sufficient nutrients from food, so no matter how much I ate, I was still starving. Things just got worse despite the treatments I had received in the hospital. I wasn't able to participate in any of life's activities. I was used to being the ringleader who gathered people together. Instead, now I told my friends, "No, I can't come. No, I really can't do that." I felt bad for my friends who called and wanted to visit. I felt I was disappointing them, along with my parents, my sister, and my grandparents. They were all suffering as a result of my illness, and realizing that filled me with feelings of guilt. Family members suffered too. "Where is my brother?" "Oh, he's in the nurse's office. His stomach is bothering him." The summer camp had just begun. How could Jordan get hit with a stomach virus this quickly? He was a counselor at the camp, and I was just entering my teens. I rarely saw him because he spent so much time at the nurse's office. He was really sick. I was upset over the whole thing, but no one knew any details about his symptoms. In the end, Jordan had to go home early, leaving me behind at the camp. Entering camp, Jordan looked very healthy. He was still really muscular, though he had gained some extra weight from eating junk food while away at college. By the end of the 6 days of camp, he had lost nearly 20 pounds. Things got even worse after my brother returned for his second year at college. He got so sick that he had to come home. I was already in a rebellious stage, but the combination of worry over Jordan and the big change in our lives triggered some hidden anger in me. I loved Jordan, and I was really concerned about his health, but I came to the point where I couldn't believe he would ever get better. Jordan didn't mean to do it, but his sickness essentially took my mother from me. She was always with him, trying to find another cure or another doctor somewhere. All of us felt the anger and frustration of our helplessness. As Jordan became sicker and more emaciated, people were more uncomfortable being around him. Yet, even in that difficult time, Jordan was still my brother, and he still had faith that God would one day heal him. In a way, he had become a second father figure for me, too. When I had problems with boyfriends or relationships, Jordan wanted desperately to be my big brother, but he couldn't do anything. I still remember him telling me over and over again how helpless he felt. He looked like a twig, and all of his hair was coming out. To my young mind, it was horrible. One thing I'll always remember is the time Jordan blacked out in the kitchen and fell face forward toward the floor. I somehow caught him just inches before he cracked his head open. That was only months before he decided to go to California to work with a man who claimed his Bible-based diet would help him. At that point, he was wheelchair bound. After only 3 months into his program, when Mom and I flew to California to see him, he actually met us outside the airport and stood up on his own. We were so excited. He was still thin, and you could tell that he wasn't perfectly healthy, but he was getting better. His hair was still thin and weird looking, but it was starting to grow back. There are two things I remember the most about that meeting. First, Jordan's attitude was really positive. That was missing in the months just before he left for California. And second was something that happened at the beach near Jordan's mobile home. He insisted on picking me up. Then he playfully tried to pick Mom up too. We have pictures of it all. That was when I knew Jordan's strength was definitely coming back. He was so different from the last time I'd seen him when his arms were frail and he couldn't even speak. Now we were all filled with hope. Jenna Rubin. Self-centeredness comes easy when you suffer from disease, but it also bothered me to think that I was disappointing others. I tried to keep a positive attitude with my friends, but it is hard to express joy when pain continually pierces your stomach and joints. I can only describe my situation as experiencing the pain of a 24-hour stomach virus or a bad case of food poisoning day and night for 2 years. Though I held to my faith that God would heal me, I was desperate enough to try anything. I grasped at every piece of health literature or booklet just in case they contained the answers to my problem. According to all of the information I was reading, my body's healing response had been turned off or compromised in some way. My hope was that perhaps some natural method would help reactivate it. Once I was discharged from the hospital, I joined my father in the search for natural pathways to renewed health. I tried everything. Regaining my health became our obsession. Ultimately, our search took me to 70 health practitioners from 7 different countries, including medical doctors, naturopaths, chiropractors, immunologists, acupuncturists, homeopaths, herbalists, colon therapists, nutritionists, and dietitians. Pinpointing the probable culprit. Only God knows why I got sick, but I have isolated a few contributors to the situation. As I mentioned, I was fortunate not to receive childhood vaccinations, which creates inherent health risks. However, the local school district forced me to receive the MMR, measles, mumps, and rubella vaccine at the age of 15 due to a supposed epidemic. This vaccine has now been implicated in digestive disorders, including Crohn's disease, and in developmental disorders such as autism. Although my symptoms didn't appear for nearly 4 years after the vaccination, there seems to be a causal relationship. The most probable culprit, however, I believe was my changed diet and lifestyle in college. College life brought a whole new stress level to my existence as well, much of it generated by my own overcommitment of time. And in my quest for athletic supremacy, I adopted a diet that was very high in carbohydrates, mostly from processed grains, dairy, and sugar, and dangerously low in fats and protein. The hard truth is that my college diet was tailor made for inducing the symptoms of most diseases, especially digestive illnesses. One more try. Despite my disappointing experience with a specific carbohydrate diet, I still believed that it would help me if I stayed on it without deviations. So I tried it one more time. I even consulted daily on the phone with Elaine Gottschall, author of Breaking the Vicious Cycle. She had worked with a physician, Dr. Haas, to heal her own daughter of ulcerative colitis, a disease very similar to Crohn's disease. However, despite my fanatical adherence to the specific carbohydrate diet for 3 to 6 months on 3 different occasions, it didn't work for me. That led to personal consultations with some of the foremost practitioners and diet experts in the world. I must have tried almost every diet ever promoted in print. I was a patient of the late Dr. Robert Atkins, author of The Atkins Diet. I also met with California-based icosapent guru Barry Sears, PhD, the author of The Zone. Then I consulted with Jeffrey Bland, PhD, a highly regarded functional medicine expert, and went through several rounds of his detoxification elimination diet. Nothing worked. These health professionals were extremely knowledgeable, highly educated, and very sincere about wanting to help me. Each of these diets has many solid underpinnings, yet something was missing that I needed. During our search for over 2 years, my father spent approximately $150,000 on natural health treatments for me, including 30 probiotic formulas, countless enzymes, fiber, anti-candida, and anti-parasitic formulas, and numerous immune boosting and detoxification products. Willing to try anything and everything. Why did I put myself through such difficult and expensive regimens? I wanted to get better and end the pain. Someone said my liver was the problem, so I decided to detoxify my liver. One health expert said he had cured 250 patients with Crohn's disease in the United Kingdom, so I agreed to undergo cell therapy with injectable sheep cells taken from embryos. The needles were huge, but, predictably, the results were non-existent. I also tried retention enemas, colonics, and even more liver detoxification plans. I tried glandulars, or granular and organ extracts taken from the dry tissues of every conceivable animal organ and gland. I even took adrenocortical extract, or ACE, an extract of bovine adrenal glands thought to possess the powers of hydrocortisone, once used extensively in medicine. For nearly a year, I injected myself 7 times a day with injectable vitamins and minerals using a small needle reserved for insulin injections. I become so emaciated that when I injected myself in the shoulders and the sides of my hips, I could feel the needle hitting bone. Got any cabbage juice and shark cartilage? I read that cabbage juice was good for the gut and rich in organic sulfur compounds, so I consumed large amounts of cabbage juice. I did the same with wheatgrass juice, Chinese and Peruvian herbs, Japanese campo, olive leaf extract, and shark cartilage. I tried the macrobiotic diet, the raw food vegan diet, and nitrogenated soy as well. My desperate hunt for a cure drove me to travel to clinics in Europe, South America, Mexico, and Canada, often in a wheelchair. Without exception, the doctors and health practitioners who treated me characterized my appearance as that of a concentration camp victim. Despite fragile health, I endured the perils of travel to visit alternative cancer clinics in Mexico and Germany, returning in worse condition than when I left. Through it all, I drew strength from my faith in God's love for me. I was difficult to live with, and at times my hope was dim, but God remained faithful. The psalmist David expressed my pain and revived my hope during daily readings from Psalm 31. In thee, O Lord, do I put my trust. Bow down thine ear to me. Deliver me speedily. I will be glad and rejoice in thy mercy. for thou hast considered my trouble. Have mercy upon me, O Lord, for I am in trouble. Mine eye is consumed with grief, yea, my soul and my belly. For my life is spent with grief, and my years with sighing. My strength faileth because of mine iniquity, and my bones are consumed. I am forgotten as a dead man out of mind. But I trusted in thee, O Lord. I said, Thou art my God. My times are in thy hand. Make thy face to shine upon thy servant. Save me for thy mercy's sake. Psalm 31, verses 1 to 2, verse 7, verses 9 to 10, verse 12, and verses 14 to 16. False data supplied by scientists for hire. As I grew more frantic, I tried almost 500 different miracle products, including 2 or 3 treatments no rational person would consider. I know what it is like to be desperate. I became the victim, I choose that word carefully, of many network marketers and mass distributors of health products who made outrageous and unfounded claims with little, if any, scientific substance. My dad scoured health magazines and called colleagues around the world searching for clinics and therapies that might help. The many machines I hooked up to my body could fill a science fiction novel. Weird science from the outer reaches of alternative health. Some of the practitioners I visited performed various forms of electrodermal screening, a method of computerized information gathering based on physics and acupuncture meridians. After one doctor probed me with his EDS machine, he said my illness was due to electromagnetic fields in my house, so I slept in a steel cage placed around my bed. At night, I was instructed to shut off the TV and clocks, all electrical devices. No, it didn't work. The next EDS practitioner told me that I was having an adverse reaction from a satellite that orbits the Earth every 7 years. This is what I call weird science from the outer reaches of the alternative health field. I tried applied kinesiology, a type of chiropractic where different tests for muscle strength and weakness are done on points of your body. I also utilized acupuncture and homeopathy without relief. Taking various medications and supplements was my life. When I wasn't visiting a doctor several times a week, I stayed at home in my chair and fantasized while watching cooking shows. I felt a special bond with Chef Emerald. I used all of my spare time puzzling over what products to use and what might help me, and I devoured more than 300 health and nutrition books. I would locate well-known authors and arrange personal consultations, refusing to meet with anyone but the best. Till there was you. Most of the doctors and practitioners I visited said they could cure me in a short period of time. One after another assured me they had never failed to cure their patients, but they made promises they couldn't keep. Their claims to healing weren't totally unfounded. Most of them had anecdotal evidence based on patient testimony. As with so many others who are desperately ill, I was willing to believe and put my faith in them. My frequent bladder and eye infections made it extremely unsettling to travel, but I did it anyway in hope of finding a cure. One time, while waiting for an airplane to take off, I calmly said to myself, if this plane went down, it wouldn't be that bad. That was my mental state during the darkest days of my desperate journey. I was not suicidal, but I felt so hopeless. I just couldn't handle the pain anymore. I wasn't actively seeking death, but I reasoned that if I died, at least I could join my Creator and be pain-free. Again, it was the psalmist who perfectly expressed my feelings at that point. I'm troubled. I am bowed down greatly. I go mourning all the day long. For my loins are filled with a loathsome disease, and there is no soundness in my flesh. I am feeble and sore broken. I have roared by reason of the disquietness of my heart. My heart panteth, my strength faileth me. As for the light of mine eyes, it also is gone from me. For in thee, O Lord, do I hope. Thou wilt hear, O Lord my God. Psalm 38, verses 6 to 8, verse 10, and verse 15. A last ray of hope drew me to Germany to receive an experimental drug made from the juices of the Venus flytrap plant. At that time, the US Food and Drug Administration did not permit this herbal substance to be imported. My big fat German nightmare. My mother accompanied me to Germany. It was a 28-hour nightmare involving numerous planes and trains. We missed one train because my mom and I couldn't drag our luggage fast enough during a layover. We waited 6 hours for another. I used the time locating and frequently visiting the bathroom. Shortly after arriving in Germany, I was told to discontinue my medications, including prednisone, which I had been taking for over a year. I suffered some devastating withdrawal symptoms, including an inability to catch my breath for 3 days. The German medical doctor concluded that my problem rested with my immune system. Certain parts were overactive and others were underactive. I stayed alone in the clinic for 6 long weeks after financial pressures from my medical bills forced my mother to return to her job as a school teacher in the US. The therapy produced no positive results. It only left me in the hands of sadly inattentive doctors and nurses. Mental problem or doctor problem? Finally, the doctor at that clinic egotistically announced that I wasn't getting well because I had mental problems. I was a 19-year-old who had been forced by illness to drop out of college and abandon my dreams. Thousands of miles and the Atlantic Ocean separated me from family and friends. I was trapped in a German health clinic where no one spoke English. The ceiling of my room was less than 5 feet high. Ouch. And most of the people assigned to care for me seemed to view me more as a nuisance than as a patient. Considering that combination, I suppose it could produce some mental problems in anyone. Miserable and in constant pain, I felt as if I were imprisoned in my own body. A cloud of despair covered me. Would I ever enjoy a normal life again? Would I ever sleep through the night or wake up without pain? Would I ever be healthy again? It was time to go home, but soon I discovered that making the trip was easier said than done. With great difficulty, I made the trip alone in a cab to the airport with my luggage. Stranded in Germany. Too weak to walk unassisted on my own, I had to be wheeled into the airport. None of the airline employees at the ticket counter understood English, and they couldn't find any record of my ticket. I tried to purchase another ticket with my credit card, but it was declined. That did it. My life seemed to spiral out of control right in front of the ticket counter, complicated by a painful urinary tract infection and pink eye in both eyes, along with my chronic bowel problems. It appeared I wouldn't get home. In extreme desperation, I quickly prayed, "Lord, I cannot do a single thing. I am putting my life in your hands. Please help me get out of this situation. I feel completely hopeless." Within minutes, my ticket was found and I boarded the plane. Though I missed my connecting flight, I finally made it home after a 30-hour ordeal. I cannot describe how relieved I was to be home. Shortly afterward, I was hospitalized a second time, completely dehydrated with a resting heart rate of 200 to 260 beats per minute. I couldn't even keep water down, and I weighed only 104 pounds. He won't make it through the night. My veins were so dry and tapped out that it took a team of nurses and doctors 2.5 hours to insert my IV. I heard one of the nurses say, "That poor boy isn't going to make it through the night." Hopelessness flooded my being, and all I could do was pray. At that point, I was ready to go home and be with my Creator. Though I felt I had lived an incredible life for my young age, I was disappointed that I had never fallen in love and gotten married. In spite of my pain, I thanked my Creator for a wonderful life, committed myself into His hands, and prepared to die. I finally drifted off into a fitful sleep and awoke to see my grandmother leaning over me with her hand on my forehead. Several nurses entered to announce that they had managed to get a blood return and could hook me up to an IV. I gained 10 pounds of water weight in one night and felt a new resolve in my body. Most normal people would have been in shock. I wanted to live, and at last I felt a glimmer of real hope until the doctors prescribed the same medications I had been given during the first hospital stay. Again, I became a human drugstore filled with antibiotics, antifungals, antiparasitics, heartburn medications, and prednisone. When I finally left the hospital and the doctors again switched me from intravenous to oral medications, this once again led to hallucinations. In the words of baseball's Yogi Berra, it was deja vu all over again. Who would commemorate such a pathetic sight? In spite of the hallucinations, I managed to tell my mom, "I want you to take a picture of me." My unusual request completely startled her. Despite everything I had been through, including hundreds of unfulfilled promises by doctors and health practitioners, I still clung to the hope that God would deliver me. I remember the question my mother asked me, "Why in the world do you want me to take a picture of you?" With all the courage I could muster, I softly replied, "Because no one will believe me when I get well. No one will ever believe that I was this sick. I'm getting out of bed and I need you to take my picture." I nearly fell in the process, and I needed help to stand up, but we got the picture. All of my options seemed to be exhausted the day my mother snapped that photo. I had a beard at the time only because I was too weak to shave and couldn't afford to cut myself with my unsteady hand. Two terrible choices. The day we shot that picture, I weighed a whopping 111 pounds, but my skin and my future still looked dead. One doctor told me that my only hope was to go to Mount Sinai Hospital in New York City for the removal of my large intestines and part of my small intestines. The only other alternative was the J-pouch procedure, at the time an experimental procedure to preserve bowel function after a colectomy, the surgical removal of the colon. Faced with two terrible choices balanced against death or a lifetime of unrelenting pain, I reluctantly decided with my family to go to Mount Sinai and get whatever surgery I needed. My primary physician literally called my condition the worst case of Crohn's disease he had ever seen. He doubted I would live long enough to return home. That revelation forced me to re-examine my options. The multiple medications I was prescribed only made me feel worse, yet there was a chance their ill effects might be reversed. The problem with surgery is that it is permanent. I had only a little bit of fight left, but I knew I wasn't going under a knife. "Hey, Jordan, Pee Wee Herman called. He wants his body back." When I wrote this quip on our community message board, none of us who lived with Jordan knew how close he would come to death over the next year. As one of Jordan's closest friends, I literally witnessed from a front row seat his painful destruction and miraculous reconstruction. I am one of the friends who used to rummage through the Rubin's nutritionally correct kitchen in bewilderment. Even to this day, I still don't know how you get milk from rice. I watched Jordan struggle with this mysterious sickness, and I saw this extremely active and athletic guy begin to wear down in unexplained exhaustion and lose his zest for life. As Jordan's condition started to progress further, I became unusually alarmed. Jordan embodied what I thought to be the ultimate health-conscious person with a basically healthy diet, plenty of exercise, a clean lifestyle, and a positive attitude. Throughout his entire high school and brief college life, he didn't consume a single alcoholic beverage or recreational drug, and he practiced sexual abstinence due to his spiritual beliefs. To see him literally waste away before my eyes was very, very difficult. We had been very involved in activities at church together, and I became the main contact with friends for updates on Jordan's condition. After a long period of trying to dispense hope to them, I found it hard to give any good news because there just wasn't any. My best friend was wasting away and dying, and there was nothing anyone could do about it. Some days, I would wake up crying, thinking to myself, "This is it. I'm going to lose my best friend." One Thanksgiving holiday, in the middle of Jordan's darkest time, I decided to read a letter at church that he had written to me in which he declared his healing by faith. He quoted me a powerful Bible verse from Hebrews 11, verse 1. "Faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen." Jordan believed that true faith could only be proclaimed during the midst of the storm, not in retrospect. Then I performed a song by Stephen Curtis Chapman, one of Jordan's favorite artists. I felt that God had really used me to communicate a message to people about faith and friendship. Things got so bad that one time when I walked into his house and saw him in such an emaciated state, I almost threw up, not out of revulsion, but out of fear. How can this person still be alive? I asked myself. His leg is thinner than my wrist. I felt an intense, gripping, emotional fear over the fact that this person who has so much to give, whose love is so infectious, was sitting in front of me looking as if he had just been liberated from a concentration camp. Even though it was difficult to be around him because of my grief, I wouldn't leave his side. There were times when Jordan would ask the why questions, but 90% of the time he was saying, I'm going to keep my faith. When I get through this, when God heals me, He is going to use me to accomplish great things. I know He has a plan for my life. One of Jordan's favorite Bible verses was Jeremiah 29, verse 11. For I know the plans I have for you, plans to give you hope and a future. I just couldn't understand that. I had to come full circle and witness everything that happened in his life to see that Jordan was right. He had a genuine vision from God, and he knew he would be in front of people one day telling his story. When Jordan went to California, he asked me to come and help. That after picture of Jordan, which has now been seen by millions of people, was taken at Pacific Beach in San Diego in front of Crystal Pier. Every morning after we drove to Boney's, a health food store, to get raw kefir and raw cheeses, we parked our RV only 50 yards away from Crystal Pier. We would have cheeseburgers for breakfast, organic cheeseburgers with whole grain buns. He was thrilled to have some semblance of his life back, and I was thrilled to have my old friend back. I was with him the night that he proposed to his wife, Nikki, and I was the best man in his wedding. Now I have the opportunity to partner with him, sharing the message of hope to those in need. I have witnessed firsthand what God can do in one man's life when that person is yielded to his will. Jason Dewberry. A final ray of hope. My father extended one last ray of hope to me after I wheeled out of the hospital early in 1996. He contacted an eccentric nutritionist and decided to personally investigate this man's program so that he could avoid getting my hopes up prematurely. The nutritionist said he believed I was ill because I was not eating the diet of the Bible. He based the failure of the doctors who treated me on the fact that they did not base their treatments upon biblical principles. It made me curious, and I agreed to try his diet. After one day on the program, I smiled for what seemed to be the first time in nearly 2 years and said, Mom, I'm going to get well. I had decided to ditch the idea of surgery and give the Bible diet a try. What did I have to lose? Starting all over again, I stopped taking all nutritional products. Instead, I began to study the Bible to see what people ate thousands of years ago. My studies uncovered an interesting fact. The longest-lived cultures in the world had a few things in common. They consumed living foods that abounded with nutrients, enzymes, and beneficial microorganisms. And they consumed healthy animal foods that were rich in nutrients. They avoided processed foods filled with empty calories that robbed nutrients from the body. Several weeks later, I flew to Southern California, still in my wheelchair, to live closer to the man who would teach me how to eat God's way. For the first time in my long battle, I saw some improvement in my health after integrating the nutritionist program with my own findings about nutrition and health from the Bible. No mother should have to see her vibrant, athletic, college-age son fitted for a wheelchair, but I did. At 6 feet 1 inch and 180 pounds, Jordan was in incredible shape and on fire for God. He was full of energy and loved life. Then he got very sick. After a series of antibiotics, Jordan went back to college weighing 150 pounds. Before long, he showed up at our door weighing only 135 pounds with a 105-degree fever. My husband and I looked at Jordan and thought, my goodness, what is wrong with our son? He wasn't the same person. He could barely walk, and many times he'd faint just walking to the bathroom. No one was able to diagnose Jordan until we found a doctor familiar with his symptoms. He looked at Jordan and immediately said, "Your son has Crohn's disease." Jordan's health went downhill from there. He progressively got sicker and lost more weight, and his hair began falling out. It was a mother's worst nightmare. We tried many doctors, drugs, and natural therapies. Nothing seemed to work. I remember when Jordan had his first upper GI series. As he walked to the x-ray room looking like a very sick old man, he fainted and fell to the floor. Later, toward the end, when we really thought we might lose him, Jordan asked me to take his picture. It was hard to even look at him, much less take a picture of him. I wanted to tell him, "Don't wear shorts." It hurt me to see his bony legs and joints. He was just skin and bones. A few of my friends told me, "You have to let him go." I'm not a negative person, but it was hard to watch my effervescent son have the life sucked out of him. I just cried my eyes out and kept praying for a miracle. I remember weeping all the way back from Germany and praying, "Take care of my son. He's in your hands. I give him to you, Lord. I have no other choice." It was one of the most difficult and greatest things I've ever done. It was just a few months later that Jordan tried a primitive version of what he now calls the Maker's Diet for 1 week. I will never forget the day he smiled and told me, "Mom, I'm going to get well." This was the first time I remembered Jordan smiling in over a year. On that momentous day, Jordan was right, and God was faithful. Phyllis Rubin. A bag of black powder. 10 months after I stopped taking all supplements, my father decided to send me a plastic bag containing a black-colored powder. Although he had promised not to send me any other nutritional products, he couldn't help himself. He said it was a special type of probiotic, or friendly bacteria. Unfortunately, I'd already tried 30 different varieties of probiotics with no success. How would this be any different? How could my father expect me to eat this? It looked like dirt. Dad called me to encourage me, saying, "It may look like dirt, but it isn't. It contains healthy compounds from the soil." An article enclosed with the package explained that these nutrients are missing from today's pesticide-sterilized, barren soils. It claimed that the contents of the bag contained far more than trace minerals. It contained vital organisms, later called soil-based organisms, or SBOs. These friendly microorganisms have been largely wiped out by the pesticides, herbicides, fungicides, and synthetic fertilizers used on America's farmlands, by pasteurization, and by modern man's disdain for all microorganisms, even those life-supportive bugs or microscopic organisms our bodies need for maximum health. After trying well over 300 different miracle nutritional products, I was understandably jaded. But for some reason, this black powder was different. All of the health research that I had read up to that point validated the fact that our soil is extremely deficient. Deficient soil leads to deficient bodies. I added the black powder to my diet. Having nothing to lose, I decided to include the odd-looking dirt organisms in my daily diet. My biblical diet consisted of kefir, naturally fermented milk from raw goats and cows' milk, organically raised, free-range or grass-fed meats, and eggs and meat from healthy chickens. It also included ocean-caught wild fish and natural sprouted or sourdough breads made from yeast-free whole grains, as well as raw nuts and seeds, organic fruits and vegetables, raw sauerkraut, and carrot and other vegetable juices. These live foods were filled with beneficial enzymes, vitamins, minerals, and friendly microorganisms. My health didn't reappear magically in one day. It takes time to overcome years of illness. I actually felt a little worse for the first 30 days as my body purged itself of toxins. The nausea increased slightly, my digestion got a little worse, and my energy levels dropped lower than usual. I was experiencing a Herxheimer reaction, or the die-off effect that many people experience when they dramatically improve their diet and lifestyles. It is an allergic response to the toxic byproducts produced when the body's pH is changed for the better, causing large numbers of pathological organisms, such as harmful bacteria and yeast organisms, to die and exit the body. The collective effect of this reaction is a temporary worsening of symptoms. In reality, it is indicating that you are responding positively to treatment. Significant improvement should follow this initial detoxification reaction. Since the time of Hippocrates, it has been understood that the symptoms of most diseases represent the efforts of the body to eliminate toxins. Gradually, for me, a newfound energy emerged, and I visited the bathroom less frequently. 1 month after I added the black powder to my diet, I noticed a marked improvement in my overall health. Becoming something of a bum. My father purchased a used motorhome for me so I could stay close to the beach and breathe the ocean air. I became something of a bum for 40 days and nights as I tried to find places to park at night where I wouldn't be arrested or fined. It was an unusual experience for a kid from the suburbs. Different people came to help me, and I spent each day praying, listening to music, and planning the preparation of my daily medicine, food. Amazingly, after my 2 brutal years of suffering, I gained 29 pounds during those 40 days, reaching an incredible, for me, weight of 151 pounds. On my 21st birthday, we took an after photograph on the beach 4 months after I arrived in California. I wasn't completely well at that point, but I was on my way to full recovery. I weighed 170 pounds and felt like the happiest man in the world. Psalm 30, which I had prayed for so long, was coming to pass. I encourage you to read the entire psalm, but I am including some important verses here. I will extol thee, O Lord, for thou hast lifted me up and hast not made my foes to rejoice over me. O Lord my God, I cried unto thee, and thou hast healed me. O Lord, thou hast brought up my soul from the grave, thou hast kept me alive, that I should not go down to the pit. Thou hast turned from me my mourning into dancing, thou hast put off my sackcloth and girded me with gladness, to the end that my glory may sing praise to thee, and not be silent. O Lord my God, I will give thanks unto thee forever. Psalm 30, verses 1 to 3, and verses 11 to 12. God worked a miracle in my life. The combination of the biblical diet and the SBOs had restored my health. I gained more than 50 pounds in 3 months. By December of 1996, after 2 years of hopeless suffering, I was home in Florida, fully restored and ready to start my life again. Praise God. By the grace of God, I had done what millions of disease victims desperately hoped to do. I had conquered illness and recovered my health. Some doctors were excited. Most were skeptical. I immediately told many of the doctors who had treated me about my dramatic recovery through the Maker's diet and unique soil organisms I named SBOs. I even mailed them before and after pictures, fully confident they would all be eager to learn about the regimen that had healed me. Some of them were excited, but most were skeptical. Dr. Morton Walker, a medical journalist who had supplied me information on some of the clinics I visited, asked if he could write an article outlining my amazing story. He published the article in the Townsend Letter for Doctors and Patients, a prestigious health publication that focuses on alternative medicine and treatments. The article generated over 2,000 phone calls from doctors and individuals who wanted to try the Maker's diet along with the SBOs. Overnight, I was forced to find a way to distribute the SBOs that had helped me get well, which precipitated the birthing of Garden of Life, a health and wellness company that supplies health education and manufactures innovative products based on the dietary principles that helped me. I then went on to earn advanced degrees in nutrition and sports medicine and continued my studies for doctoral degrees in naturopathy and nutrition. Discovering Divine Destiny. My mission in life since my recovery is to help people who are sick regain their health and to help the healthy flourish even more. It seems obvious to me that I endured my ordeal for a reason, to discover a major part of the divine destiny for my life. I can speak with authority on nutrition, disease, and health, not because I have paid my dues academically, though I have, but because I have personally survived the torturous walk through the valley of disease and death and emerged triumphant. At this writing, I have been enjoying good health for nearly 8 years, and I've been free of symptoms and medication for almost 9 years. Crohn's disease is supposedly incurable. Because of my experience, I can confirm that no disease is incurable. Although the disease process in some people may be too advanced for them to recover completely, I'm convinced that every person's state of health can be greatly improved. By following biblically and historically proven health principles, an individual can return to a diet and lifestyle that will lead to regeneration of the entire body, mind, soul, and spirit. I remember during my illness telling myself that I can help just one person who is suffering to overcome his illness, then it will all have been worth it. I have now dedicated my life to teaching others how to attain the level of health and wellness they only dream of. My studies also taught me a very important truth. The best way to cure disease is to never get it. I believe that everyone, whether presently healthy or ill, can benefit by incorporating the principles of the Maker's Diet into their lives. This program is for you, whether you want to avoid disease, enjoy a long and healthy life, overcome the painful symptoms of illness, lose 20 pounds, or prevent a disease that runs in your family. My bout with severe illness has made me a stronger person. I can relate to the biblical character Job, who suffered severe loss and extreme illness before God restored his health and increased his fortunes. The Lord has restored to me what was taken away, and he has multiplied it more than I could have ever asked or imagined. Many would say that my healing and restoration began when I discovered the diet and health secrets of the world's greatest physician, as followed by the world's healthiest people. I believe the spark that ignited the flame of healing in my life was the faith that God allowed my illness for a reason, and if I would trust him, he would restore my health and direct my path. Today, I'm on a mission from God to change people's lives and give them the message of hope and healing. I will spend the rest of my life telling the world the truth that will set them free. I waited patiently for the Lord, and he inclined unto me and heard my cry. He also brought me up out of a horrible pit, out of the miry clay, and set my feet upon a rock and established my steps. He has put a new song in my mouth, praise to our God. Many will see it and fear, and will trust in the Lord. Psalm 40, verses 1 to 3.